Everybody, I'm here with Foxy, Lieutenant Colonel retired Chris Fox, Special Forces Green Beret Snake Eater, a man of faith, a guy that I spent many hours contemplating scripture and war and all the things that go along with it. This is the pre-show, just me and him sitting around. We were already kind of chatting, and it's nice to have relationships with people such that we can visit together and be together in a more informal way. And so here Chris and I are, and we're doing the pre-show, and I'm just gonna talk to him a little bit and share with you guys, share with all of you about what we're doing. And Chris, really, I'd love to get your advice, if you don't mind, about a few things before we kind of get started. A jumpmaster buddy of mine, and you understand Army buddies very well, got sick. He got a tumor, and he was unable to, remember breakfast and, what the schedule for the day was and things. And I was prompted to call him and record our conversation because he could remember the old days. He could still tell the stories about when we were jumping out of airplanes and things. And so we captured that, and I ended up putting it out on the internet, calling it Heroes I Know. And I called several others, an old Command Sergeant Major buddy of mine, and just lots of folks that I served with, and tried to just get the stories told. I hadn't thought it through. I just had the stuff to do it. Chris, I had that kind of capability. And so I did it, and I enjoyed it. I did like 7 different kind of episodes, and then it fell to the wayside. How life happens. It's not earning any income. I don't even thought about it, really thought it through. I just had the capabilities to do it, and I was doing it as a hobby. And so fast forward to 2021, about a year ago, and I find out that one of my stalwart soldiers, one of my linebackers, one of my hole fillers, that he had throat cancer. And he was in hospice, and he couldn't even talk. And I'm like, why didn't I get Sergeant Mason's story? And I'm just like, I am failing at my calling. And so, I got several buddies together and people that I knew, and I thought about how we could maybe start doing it again, and I started taking people to sign up, and my buddy Joe Benson and he was one of my soldiers. I was his first sergeant. He was the guy he was my go-getter, man. He would go get it. And so, he designed our little coin and our box and stuff, and he's gone out and designed it. And so the idea, and we have this titanium thumb drive that we're putting the memories on, and he's made this little foam box thing that goes on the inside. But the idea, Chris, is to get our stories on tape, the legacy. Because I don't have my grandfather's stories. I don't have a single thing of him on tape, any of them. I have began to record my dad's stories, but only because I have done it. Only because I have stuck a recorder and a camera in his face and said, "We're going fishing, Dad, and I'm going to ask you questions," That's kind of the way we've passed on these things. And I think for some reason they're valuable to somebody. So, we've been doing this, and I feel like at some point, there'll be some donations or something. Somebody's gonna the money is not gonna come from the veteran. The donations and things are going to be coming from people wanting to hear so and so's story. I want to hear Uncle Ted's story. and I'm going to sponsor Uncle Ted. Uncle Ted doesn't know me, but his nephew or niece want to hear his war story, and I want to maybe be the guy to capture that story. I think is the way this is looking, as the way, because I'm going to get your story, and I've got 137 today, others on the list that I'm going to continue to get, and we're going to buy coins and things for them, and ask for donations to support it. But the idea, the goal of everything that I've been thinking about and Joe's been thinking about as we've built this so far, Chris, is that the real value of this is the story that the veteran is telling. And it's not a YouTube view, and it's not a Facebook live stream thing, but it is that story. It is that story. It is that experience. It is the chance that people are going to learn a different side of Chris Fox than they will ever know after they listen and watch what we do tonight together, right? They don't know you. There's very few people that know you like you're going to expose yourself tonight about, where you grew up and what kind of tennis shoes you like, and, all those kinds of things that people have. And so my thought for you and my advice for somebody who I respect, a mentor of mine, is, if you see us coming off track, or if you see ways that we could do better, and of course, obviously, we're improving all the time. This is another step of improvement, I think. I have a pretty good interface where I can change things that are on the screen, and make a show almost that's worthy of maybe being a live show, as such that people can watch and get content at some level. People don't consume media like they used to. The Dallas on Friday nights at 9 o'clock, it's not that big a deal. Lately, was it Tombstone or some Yellowstone? That was it. That turned into a big deal. But it was a concerted effort, and obviously a great. They did a great job with it. But I don't know. I was just wondering, Chris, as you see and you watch what's doing, I don't know if you got any advice or just this is kind of a pre-show, I guess, us hanging out on the Heroes Live, with Chris Fox, everybody. What do you think, Chris?
Well, just go ahead and start firing some questions my way, and we'll get this thing started.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. Well, so where are you from, man? Obviously, like Boston, right? I mean, come on, somewhere around in that area, right?
Yeah, I grew up 18 miles south of Boston in Brockton, Massachusetts. You can see behind me marvelous Marvin Hagler. He actually fought out of Brockton with the Petronelli brothers. He's originally from New Jersey, but he fought out of Brockton about the time I was growing up. I went to basketball camp with his sons, and then that's where I grew up, right outside of Boston. So big influence with the Red Sox, the Celtics, Larry Bird, couple championships there, the Bruins, and then the Patriots were pretty horrible back then, but then they rebounded pretty nicely the last 17 years, and then we're probably back in a rebuilding year as we watch the Bills take off in the AFC East.
Isn't it neat how you, in a way, you measure your life by your sports teams? We're doing good, but the Patriots are rebuilding. Yeah, that's kind of neat. That's a kind of neat thing. I know that one of the memorabilia that I saw as I was preparing a slideshow for you was like a stadium seat, right?
Yes, I have a chair from Fenway Park. Yes.
Oh, that's got to be tell me why that's so important to you. Why you would get something like that?
Sure. When I went to Afghanistan in 2011, you do a right seat ride with the unit that's in front of you. So I went over there for 2 weeks with a bunch of my staff, and up on the JOC floor, the Joint Operations Center floor, there was a stadium chair from Yankee Stadium. And I was looking around, and I said, whose chair is this? And they said, oh, so that belongs to the battalion commander, the commander you're replacing. When he was the S3, the operations officer, years ago, his staff bought him that chair because they were dismantling the old Yankee Stadium to build the new $1 billion Yankee Stadium. And they were auctioning off memorabilia and items from the old Yankee Stadium. So they bought him a chair, and they gifted it to him. So, I was in Afghanistan for about 2 weeks. I'd see the chair every day. Obviously, being from Boston, I hate the Yankees. Do appreciate their 27 World Championships, but not a Yankees fan. And I gave my camera to this NCO, and I said, "Hey, take a picture of this of me sitting in this piece of crap chair from New York City." So he takes a picture of me in the chair, and then I get back to the United States. I had about 2 more months before we went back, and I blew the photo up to an 8x10. I wrote a letter to the president of the Red Sox and said, "Hey, sir, I'm bringing my 500-man Special Forces task force over here. There's a Yankee chair right here at Bagram Air Base. I want to replace it with one from Fenway. What do you think?" So about 3 or 4 days later, I get this call from his executive officer, and he's like, "Fox, where are you? We are shipping a chair to you." So I was still at Bragg. They shipped it down to Bragg, and I took it over to Afghanistan. The soldiers over there, they built a little stand for it, put a plaque on there, Lieutenant Colonel Fox, Camp Montron. And for about 2 weeks while we did our right seat ride, both the chairs were next to each other. And then after my 8-month tour, I came back, got invited by the Red Sox to go up there for, I was getting ready to retire. So they sent me and my wife, some tickets. And I called up there and I said, "Hey, I'm going to bring the chair up to Boston and give it back." And the XO says, "No, Fox." He goes, "Just keep it." And I was like, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "That's a gift from us to you. Thank you very much." So I've had the chair ever since.
Hey man, that is really cool. That is really cool to have a chair like that. I mean, I, look, it's really weird to think about, like the roles that we play in life and in our world. And so you got to think about at the particular moment that we're talking about in the world that we live in of knights and armor and battle. That was your throne as a commander of your unit, right? That was where you figuratively, wielded your, sword of battle, right?
Sure. And you can even see if you look closely at the chair is behind me right here. You can see it right there.
Oh yeah, oh awesome.
But back, on the back panel where I sit, my 9mm would scrape against it probably thousands of times, because you're right. That's where I command and controlled our forces for 8 months in combat against the Taliban, commanding Special Operations Task Force East. So there's hundreds and maybe 1,000 scratches of my 9mm every time I sat in the chair, because they are a little restrictive, and it's just a reminder of the work that we did over there, defending our freedom here in America.
Oh, amen, amen. Sir, thanks so much for serving. Thank you for leadership. So as we go more and more, I'm not sure what time it is. As we get ready to go hot, we go into the formal portion here with, Foxy, Lieutenant Colonel Chris Fox. Chris, you and I, we prayed together many, many nights, many days, many weekends, Sunday school class. We had a close knit group that we were a part of, and I'm proud of that. And you, oh gosh, how do I say it? You're spiritual without fanaticism. You're level-headed, yet well-read. It's interesting to find someone that digs ditches real well as solves physics problems. You're one of those guys, and so I enjoyed our time together very much, and I appreciate you hanging out with me. You grew up. You're not about the same age. What year were you born?
1968.
Yeah, me too. Me too. 68. That's a great year. That's a great year. And you were south of Boston. Did you live in a neighborhood? Did you ride a bicycle? Did you come home when the street lights, came home on, or what?
Yeah, I grew up in a standard neighborhood. We were pretty much a bedroom community outside of Boston. Most of our folks lived, and worked in and out of, the Boston area or even north of Boston. So my dad was in the most of his career National Guard and Reserve time. He was Field Artillery Command Sergeant Major. So that was my first military influence. And then I walked to elementary school, took the bus to junior high for 2 years, and then we walked to high school. So I had a really close knit group of friends in our neighborhood. I quickly learned I wasn't so good in basketball, even though I went to basketball camp with Marvelous Marvin Hagler's sons. I got cut from basketball in seventh grade, and I'd walk down the neighborhood to play with my friends on Saturday, and I'm like, hey, where's Mark and Paul? They're like, oh, they're at the swim meet. I'm like, okay, what's a swim meet? And I'd walk down the street. I'm like, hey, where's Lori and Brenda? They're like, they're at the swim meet. I'm like, where's Bobby and Mary? They're like, they're at the swim meet. And I'm like, what's this swimming thing? So, once they finally came back from, these weekend, swim meets to New Hampshire, to Danbury, to Lowell, to Worcester, all around Cape Cod, I was like, hey, what's the swim thing you guys do? They're like, oh, we all swim competitively for the YMCA and for AAU. So I figured, well, if I can't, if you can't beat them, join them. So I actually started swimming competitively with them in the seventh grade. Cut from basketball, switched over to swimming, and that was really my first network that I built, was all the swimmers. All of us grew up, probably within a half a mile of each other. Many of us swam in college. Some people on scholarship. Now most of us swim, master's programs, or do the little 10K triathlon, deal. And still, wonderful group of friends. And swimming really taught me early on, goal setting, individual goals, team goals. Obviously, there's weight training, there's nutrition, and then there's the swimming in itself. So, that just kind of bled into high school. I went to a really large high school. There were 5,000 kids in my high school, which is bigger than most small colleges. And you had to find your niche. My niche was swimming. My senior year, I was one of the tri captains for the swim team, and the girls captain Dawn. She lives out in Charlotte. Her daughter graduated from the Naval Academy the same year that my daughter graduated from West Point. So that was just kind of cool. We kind of had that together. I actually went and saw her daughter swim up at ECU, Eastern Carolina. The Naval Academy came down and swam against the Pirates. So, we met up there. But swimming was a big part of my life, a big part of my, growing up. Still did the basketball, still played, Little League baseball, like most kids growing up. Did not play football, although I came from a football powerhouse. In the late 80s, we were nationally ranked in the USA Today poll. One of my classmates went to Michigan, played 4 years as a wide receiver, went to the NFL, played for the Patriots and the Chicago Bears. So there was a lot of good athletes at our high school. Of course, when you can draw from 5,000 kids, we probably could have fielded 2 football teams and 2 baseball teams and 2 swim teams, 2 tennis teams. So again, we just had to find our niche, and my niche early on was swimming, and then that carried me. Even into college, I swam for 3 years in college as well.
It's neat that you use the term network. You said that's the first network I built. That's one of the things that I noticed about you. You are a team builder. Tell me how you do that, or what your thought process, or maybe expound more on just any of those concepts. But I've always noticed that in you.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, growing up in the Army, you have your platoon, and then you have your company. You work for the battalion, and then you're going to move up later on as an NCO or an officer working on the staff. So you build friendships. You build these small networks. When I was in the 101st, we all missed the Gulf War. We were all in Ranger School when the Gulf War, the Air War, was over. And then, when we got to Fort Campbell, there was pretty much the haves and the have-nots. There was the guys that had the combat patches and the CIBs, the combat informers badges, and then those that didn't. So I was in the batch that didn't. And, so we kind of bonded, the guys that didn't have the combat experience. Not that they saw a lot of combat. I mean, 100 hours of combat, cutting off Highway 8, shooting up a few cabbage trucks. Okay, if that's combat, I got it. Here's your Bronze Star. Thank you. But, I kind of built a network with the have-nots, and a majority of us, of the officers, the lieutenants, many of us went into special forces. Maybe that was predestined. Maybe we were all going to do that anyway. That's probably a different story. But, I kept really close contact. And of course, when you go through, some hard things in the Army, like infantry training, like Ranger School, like Jump Master School, Special Forces Assessment Selection, you really rely on other people to get you through. I mean, you have what you have. You have your strength, you have your smarts, you have your wits, Um, but you have your friends and folks that you can count on, and you're relying on those people to have your back. You got to learn, who you can trust, and who can trust you. But I think I've always been a reliable friend, teammate, coworker, and whether that's just, training up to go to one of these events, to one of these schools, or, even once you get into, the Special Forces Regiment, we're really relying on a critical skill set for folks that can work together individually. That's pretty much how we assess you. And if a person can work well by themselves, whether it's land navigation, whether it's planning, whether it's long range movements, hitting a target, well, that individual is going to work really well with another small team of individuals, whether that be 2 or 3, 12, 15, 20. So you learn those skill sets pretty early in the Army, to get through a jump master school, to get through Ranger school. A lot of that is individual. You're up late night studying, you're doing all your nomenclature, you're doing all of the things that you have to do. But when you get inside the aircraft, when you get on the ground with that, that platoon, that patrol, you've got to motivate them to carry on the mission. Everyone's cold, everyone's tired, everyone's hungry, everyone's ticked off. In fact, my son just started Ranger school on Sunday. So he's probably in the warm pit right now doing 2.5 hours of combatives. And it's his turn to go, So I tell folks that, the Army, to me, the Army's pretty easy. There's rules and regulations, there's orders, written and verbal, there's UCMJ. If you follow those, you stay in between the wickets, you're going to do okay. There are hard things that you can do in the Army, like I mentioned those schools before. And, a lot of that is temporary. But, once you get into, some elite units, you get into the 82nd, 101st, 10th Mountain, Special Forces, and other units, people are going to rely on you for what you know, and then how you operate, within that realm. So building teams is important to me. Obviously, being a team leader, later a company commander in Special Forces, our company commanders are majors, same as aviation, and then later as a battalion commander. There's a huge amount of counseling for both young officers and NCOs and senior NCOs as well. And I really kind of took that on as more of a servant leader. I was put in those positions, probably more through an act of God. I'm not the smartest, I'm not the strongest, I'm not the fastest, but the skills that I do have, I've learned how to harness those to get me to the positions that I wanted to be at. And a lot of times it just worked out where I probably was the right guy at the right time in those places. So, counseling's, really big to me. Mentoring's really big to me. As you mentor NCOs and young officers, you tell them that, hey, you have to have a relationship with your branch manager. You can be that gray guy and go 3 or 4 years. And I read some of your Facebook posts about, you're going to quit, air defense artillery and go CID because there's promotion opportunities. There was higher pay. And, as if you ignore the branch manager, who really can control your life, one day he's going to get a message down and it's going to be, hey, there's 10 filled positions. And we haven't heard from Will Marshall. We haven't heard from Chris Fox. We're going to send that guy to Korea or Poland or Czechoslovakia, if you cultivate a relationship with your branch manager, maybe you know him from a prior life, you went to college together, you served in units together, his ex-wife, whatever. If you cultivate that relationship, and they have kind of your top 5 places that you want to go, and then they also have your top 5 of places that you do not want to go, maybe a Fort Polk, maybe in Alaska, maybe a Fort Drum, whatever. They need to know that. But if you just try to be the gray guy and just, kind of stay between the wickets, someday branch is going to call your number and they go, hey, Fox, we got an assignment for you, and it's called Fort Polk. And that's unfortunate because that probably could have been avoided, So, having that network, building that team, being reliable, being a team player, those are a lot of the things that I espouse, and the folks that I do mentor, young folks coming up in the military, just young folks, in general. I share them, a lot of these ideas.
So, you kind of skipped over a little bit of what it might be like to have a command sergeant major for a father. Was he,
Yeah.
were you like dress right dress? Were you at ease in, Tell me about that.
It wasn't the great Santini. I mean, he was a good father. He worked during the week, and then, of course, he was a weekend warrior. He'd go to camp. He'd go to Fort Sill. He'd go to, West Point. He'd go up to, 40th and Allen, up to Jericho firing range. Every once in a while, he'd take me and my brother along, on a trip, a guards trip. But no, I mean, he wasn't, super demanding. Even getting back to the swimming, we played Little League Baseball. We played CYO basketball. But my parents didn't push us into sports. It was really kind of up to us. We didn't play musical instruments. My parents weren't musically inclined. We tried a piano for a little while. It didn't work out. My brother and I wanted to play drums. They're like, no, you're not going to play drums. Got it. But there was the only push I got was when I got into high school, and I started talking about the Army. Obviously, 1983 when I started high school. The 82nd went down to Grenada. There was also Operation Golden Pheasant, down there in Honduras. I started thinking about, military service. And of course, I bring up the option to enlist. And my father's like, no, he goes, if you want to go in the military, I want you to become an officer. He's like, no one has graduated college in our family in 100 years. He's like, I want you to be the first one. So that's when I started looking at military options. And I got into and accepted to Norwich University, which is up in Northfield, Vermont. It's the oldest private military college in the nation. I know down in the South, everyone's very familiar with VMI, the Citadel, Texas A&M, North Georgia. But, Norwich is actually the original first private military college, started in 1819.
That's
so
awesome.
I went up there, did my 4 years in college. My first year, I actually started out in Air Force ROTC. You probably remember in 1986, this movie came out. You probably didn't see it. It was called Top Gun. Everybody wanted to be a pilot. Everyone wanted to fly fast movers. And so did I. So when my first year at Norwich, I actually was in Air Force ROTC for a full year. Did not do well on the Air Force Officer Qualification Test. It's a test that you take to test your aptitude to fly. It's kind of like the LSAT or the SAT, but it's for flying. And I was not a pilot. I didn't have a pilot's license. So here I am taking this SAT type test with thrust and, pedostatic tubes and, yaw and pitch. And so Foxy bombed that one. And, they basically said, hey, you do not qualify to be a pilot. You do not qualify to be a navigator. You could be a missileer. Maybe we could find something in logistics. So I went down in the Army Department with my 2.8 GPA, and they said, hey, you have really good grades. You can compete for a 2-year scholarship, and we'll send you to airborne school next summer. So I just immediately signed up for the Army, and I called my dad on a payphone. I know they don't have those anymore. I called him on this payphone in Gerard Hall and said, hey, Dad, I just switched to Army ROTC. And he's like, Foxy, he's like, I've been waiting 12 months for this phone call. So that pretty much solidified that.
Amen. Amen. So there you are in Norwich, military college, and they're gonna. Did they yell at you? Was it like basic training kind of thing? Did they try to make you stand in lines and fold your
Yeah.
sheets just right?
Yeah. The first year is it's very demanding. Back in the 80s, hazing was, pretty much, well, it was pretty much expected.
It was the heyday of hazing.
It kind of was, I mean, if you watch the Lord's Discipline, if you watch some of those old movies, it was right like that. And the first year is just difficult being a rook. Obviously at West Point, they call them plebes. Here at the Citadel, they call them knobs. And then at BMI, they call them rats. But yeah, that first year system, it's tough. It's a shock to your system. But again, you bond really closely with, the folks that are in your company, many of whom I'm still friends with today. Lifelong friends. One lives here in Charleston with us. We get together quite regularly. And you learn to rely on those folks. Not all of us go in the military, so at these private military colleges, like I mentioned, about 25% will go into the force, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps. There's even an option to go into the Coast Guard if you had a scholarship and wanted to just branch transfer over. The first year system was very rugged, very rough. And then, it progressively gets a little bit easier because you actually assume roles of the cadre. Your sophomore year, you'll be a corporal. Your junior year, you're a cadet staff sergeant, cadet, first sergeant. and then you senior your cadet officer.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love one of the things that I notice, especially about our military organizations, New Mexico Military Institute is another one like that, where the graduates are extremely loyal and loving to that institution. I've heard you go on day after day about Norwich and your experience there and your support and your first love for it. And it's great to see the legacy that comes through that, right?
Yes, and so much so that my dad passed away when my youngest brother was in high school. So I told Jeremy, I was like, "Hey, you really should go to Norwich, your first year." And he's like, "No, I'm just going to stay here in Boston and take care of mom and go to a local school, local college." And I'm like, "No," I said, "For me and for dad, just go to Norwich for your first year, try it out." So he went up there first year. Again, it was a rough year, but he did well. He graduated. He got his commission. He went in the infantry. Went to airborne school, air assault school, ranger school. He went to combat twice with 101st. He's had a brilliant career. I just promoted him back in October to lieutenant colonel at West Point, and he just screened for battalion command. He was selected for a signal battalion command the summer after next. So,
Oh, congratulations. That's an amazing legacy. That is awesome. Yeah, hey, so let's take a minute real quick and do this. This is a slideshow I made for us, sir. So let's watch this slideshow together. Do you mind? Sounds fun, right?
send
Let's
it.
do it. Let's do it.
I've got sunshine on a cloudy day. When it's cold outside, I've got the month of May. Well, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, I'm talking about my girl, my girl. I've got so much honey, the bees envy me. I've got sweeter songs, baby, than the birds in the trees. Well, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, I'm talking about my girl, my girl. I don't need no money or
There you go. I love you, sir. Thanks for hanging out with me. I really, really appreciate it. That's a little tribute slideshow I've done to honor Lieutenant Colonel retired Chris Fox. Foxy, as everybody knows him lovingly, one of our favorite leaders that I know of in the Army. I know I sure had a good time hanging out with you. I never was your soldier. I always watched you from afar, and you were in a totally different realm than I was. Tell me about how you got into the Special Forces area.
Sure. When I was up at Norwich, my sophomore year, 2 Green Berets were assigned at Norwich. One was a Sergeant Major Omasta from Bad Tolz, Germany, and then another one was Master Sergeant Jerry Mooney. Again, he was from Bad Tolz by way of Fort Devens. And, very impressed with these 2 NCOs. When you're a young cadet, you're a college student, you're an athlete, but you're still involved with the Corps Cadets. And then on the weekends, we would do FTXs, field training exercises. And these guys would invite SF teams to come up from Fort Devens and go out in the field with us for 3 or 4 or 5 days. And these guys were all on like first name basis. We didn't know what rank they were. They didn't have patches on. And they're teaching us how to patrol, how to do ambushes and raids. We did kill classes with chickens and rabbits, survival. It was pretty fantastic. And so after like the second year, I went to Sergeant Major Mooney. I said, Master Sergeant Mooney. I said, "Hey, how do you become, in Special Forces?" And he's like, "Well, we don't take officers. There's no lieutenants in SF. So your best vehicle is to go infantry and go to airborne school, go to ranger school, get some time, get some deployments under your belt, and then you can try out as a captain. So I kind of knew early on, probably around 19 or 20, 21, that was the path that I wanted. I figured if I could go in the Army and be surrounded by guys like this, this would be a good fit for me. So, go in the infantry, I went to the 101st. Obviously, I missed Desert Shield, Desert Storm. But, when you're at Campbell, you still go to JRTC. We went to NTC. We went back to JRTC and did Op 4 support. You get a lot of those reps. You do a lot of time in the back 40. And then, it was my turn for Special Forces assessment selection. I trained up, and then I went to Bragg and assessed for that and got selected. So it was a long road, from the time you pin on your lieutenant bars to, 3.5 years later, you pin on your captain bars. And that's the first chance you get to, even try it out. It's a long road, but very, very worthy. And I think I was a good fit for SF, and it was a good fit for me.
Amen. Amen. What, it's weird to kind of ask this, even think about it. You asked the general, like, did you stand at attention real good? So I think about asking a battalion commander, tell me about assessment and selection. Was that easy for you? Was it, what did you find? What did you find difficult or hard or easy about selection? What did they even have selection back then? I guess they did.
Yeah, they just started it. Special Forces became a branch in 1987. And, the reason they came up with selection was that folks wanted to come to Bragg. So let's say you were, armor out at Fort Ord in California, and you just want to get on the East Coast. So you would put in for Special Forces. You would come to the Q course, whether you passed it or not. If you flunked out, you probably already went to airborne school en route. So now you're airborne qualified, you're at Bragg. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to send you to the Army unit at Fort Bragg. So the Army figured out real quick, hey, we can't just keep bringing folks to Fort Bragg to quit the Q course or fail out, not make the standard. So they developed the Special Forces Assessment Selection. It's a 3-week, it's 21 days long, and it's pretty much designed after the British SAS concept. The vehicle that Special Operations Forces around the world use for their assessment is long-range land navigation. So you'll start out, to me, SFAS is kind of like a football tryout. It's you against the course. You don't really know what the standards are. And back when we came in the Army was task, condition, standard. So at SFAS, they give you the task and condition, but they just don't tell you what the standard is. So the task, run 5 miles on this road, follow the cones, do the best you can. So the task is run 5 miles or 6 or 7. They don't really tell you how long. Run on this road, stay in between the cones, and then do the best you can. So the first part of selection is all individual. There's PT tests, there's road marches, there's a lot of land navigation prep. They'll bring everyone together to get on the same sheet as far as, how to plan your routes, how to handrail, how to use an attack point, how to use a backstop. Some things that you and I have used, when you're out in the woods, because a lot of folks don't come with, a hunting background or a backpacking background. Me being an infantry officer, obviously I've had more reps being an infantry officer, doing my platoon planning, going to ranger school and stuff. But, if you're in the Army band and you want to come to SFAS, they will put you on an equal footing, 4 or 5 days, cadre led, individual led, land navigation. And then the second part of the SFAS is individual land navigation. So long, arduous movements through the swamps, through the thickets, all by yourself. It's no buddy team. And then that's pretty much the vehicle that they use. And at the end of selection, they put you through about 5 or 6 days of events where they put you on teams together, 12, 14-man teams, and you'll carry telephone poles through the woods. You'll carry an RB-15 through the woods. You'll push a Jeep that has flat tires. Again, they're trying to put mileage on your body. They're trying to stress you, see how you act under a stressful situation. And then at the end, you go before a board, and then the board selects you, yes or no. Some folks will get a second chance to come through. Some folks, they'll be never to return. So that's pretty much how Special Forces selection works. They did have it when we were coming up through the ranks, because SF had already been established as a branch, and once you get through selection, and then if you haven't had airborne school, they'll send you down to Fort Benning for jump school, and then after that, they'll slot you for a qualification course at Bragg.
Did you find one thing particularly easy or hard about selection when you went through?
Well, the thing that's hard is that it's not like Ranger School. There's no yelling and there's no screaming. It's you against the course. So all your instructions are on, we had a chalkboard. Now it's probably a dry erase board. And again, it's a task condition. There's no standards. So, be in formation tonight at 2100 with a 55-pound ruck, map and compass, headlamp, standing by. And if you're not in formation, you're done. If you don't have your map and compass, you're done. There's no yelling and screaming. So a lot of the young folks, a lot of the E5s, the E4s, even some guys from the Ranger Battalion, they're used to having an NCO put a boot in their friggin' fourth point of contact. And here it's you, just personal responsibility. So if you're not good at taking care of yourself and being, first on the truck, first off the truck, first with your ruck on, all those little things get noticed. Who's ready to go, who's ready to train, who has all their equipment. They'll weigh your rucks in the middle of the woods. There'll be a sergeant in the middle of the woods. You go over there, hey, top off your water, put your ruck on the scale. So they have these scales. Like you'd never think there'd be a scale out in the middle of the woods, And there's an E7. He throws your ruck up on a scale. Hey, it says 49 pounds. What was the standard? Oh, it's supposed to be 55, Sergeant. Roger that. Well, he opens up a little black book and he puts a check next to your name, and next thing you know, you're going back to Fort Bliss, Texas. So there's no yelling and screaming. So for folks that come from different backgrounds, where even in the 82nd, even the 101st, even the Ranger Battalion, I mean, that E6 squad leader is constantly in Joe's stuff, and then they get to selection, and it's like no one's yelling at you, no one's telling you where to be, what time, what uniform. It's a lot of individual stuff. So that's what we want. We want people that can think on their feet. They keep their wits about them. They can take an incredible amount of pain, but they can also land navigate. So land navigation, whether you're in the British SAS or the Israeli IDF or the Rhodesian Special Forces, they've determined that individual land navigation is a good vehicle because you're going to be stressed. There's a time standard. You have to navigate, so you have to know at least some simple math. You have to know how to use your map and compass, but you can get from point A to point B yourself, and you can carry that heavy load. So if you get to a next rendezvous point and they say, hey, carry this rucksack with you, they're going to just test and see how do you think? Are you defeated? Are you like, oh my God, now I got to carry 2 rucks? It's like, no, like roger that, pick up that ruck, and then you'll take 10 steps and say, hey, drop that other ruck, continue mission. So. There's all these little angles that they're it's a psychological battery as well as a physical test. They want to see how you cope with stress, and that land navigation at night. So we do the STAR land nav course. You probably heard the STAR land nav course. It starts at 02 in the morning, and it goes till 11:30. So it's 9.5 hours. Well, guess what? You have to find 2 points before the sun comes up. Your night land nav comes first. You start in the middle of the night, so you better be able to move at night, through the swamps, through the bogs, over the hill and dale, and you got to find 2 points before the sun comes up. So at 6:30, when that sun's breaking, you better be moving to your 3rd point, because you only have until 11:30, and then time's up. You have to find 4 points. So you got to find 2 in the day, 2 at night, and then, there's no wavering. There's no, I came in, 9.5 hours plus 15 minutes. Like, no, the standard's the standard. So, you have to be good at that skill.
Is there a lost lieutenant story that you have? Did you tell, is there a time when you were out there?
Not really lost lieutenant, but at one point, we got to the last point, and, you set an attack point. So once you get to your attack point, let's say you have like less than 600 meters to go. So you're at a road intersection, you're at a church, you're at a very identifiable feature. And and now you shoot your hard azimuth, your hard calculation into the point. So I go in, I can't find the point. I come back out, I see another guy, because you're out there, you're spread out over about probably a 70 by 40 kilometer square of land out in out near Camp McCall. And so I see this other soldier, and of course he must be on his attack point going into the point, and he can't find it either. And so we both kind of restart. You can't talk to each other, you can't collude, but I started moving and I tripped over a log, which, that's not hard to do. And of course, your rucksack comes over your head, flips me completely over, and I'm on all fours, and I look up and I see a 5-gallon water can. It's about 20 feet in front of me. And I was like, what is there a water can doing out here? And then it hit me like, oh, the point sitter must be there. And there was just this wall of ivy that was about 2 feet thick that ran about 18 yards long. And he was camped behind this wall of ivy. So I just put my ruck on, acted like I knew what I was doing. Obviously, the guy didn't see me, do the rucksack flop. And I just kind of made a beeline over to that 5-gallon water can. And then I knew that guy behind me saw, he was laughing from seeing me flip over. But then he saw that I was going to a direct point. And he probably waited about 10 minutes before I moved out. And then, he made his rendezvous. But, yeah, I was never lost, never, was totally defeated. Like, what am I going to do? It was just, I knew the skill, I was good at it. And through some of my mentoring, I teach land navigation now. I've taught it to my kids, several of their West Point classmates. Folks would even come to brag and say, hey, can I get 4 or 5 hours on the Uncle Foxy land nav course? And I would take them out there. We do about 2.5 hours of map reading on a Friday night, sleep over, and then we'll hit Waffle House in the morning at about 5, and then we go out on the course for about 4 hours. So I've helped folks get ready for SFAS, Ranger School, Pathfinder. Obviously, my 2 knuckleheads went to West Point. You got to be able to do land nav as a lieutenant and as a cadet, and a bunch of their folks would come down for spring break, and I'd take them out there to the back 40 and teach them as well.
Land nav is an amazing skill, right? It is, and it does. It teaches you a lot about yourself as you look down and you look around and you go, okay, I guess I'm gonna figure it out. That's great. That's great. What was, you described SFAS, but something we skipped over was Ranger School. Was Ranger School easy, hard for you? It's a different thing. You classified it way different.
Yeah, no, Ranger School is very difficult. There, you got the shock treatment right up front. The first 2 weeks is just, running and gunning. You're doing, physical training every day. You're doing, road marching. You're doing land nav. You're doing obstacle courses, and then you slowly get into patrolling. And then the patrolling, it's very subjective. It depends on who you have is grading you. No, I recycled Florida and had to go back through, to get my tab. So. Ranger School was a very hard crucible, for a second lieutenant to get through. Now, I know the school's designed for, privates and E4s and E5s and young lieutenants. Every once in a while, they'll sprinkle in an E7 or a captain. But it's a good, strong Army leadership school where, again, you have to be, very fit, very, very well oriented to the patrolling aspect of infantry tactics. In 7-8, and then you've got to motivate folks to help get you through the patrols. So you start off doing squad patrols, and then when you get to the mountains in Florida, then it goes to the platoon patrols. So there's a couple Marines sprinkled in there. There's a couple SEALs sprinkled in there. We all come from different backgrounds, so you could get matched up with a PFC from the 2nd Ranger Battalion who's your platoon sergeant. It's like, hey, we got to get these 44 guys, up that mountain or through the swamp, hit the objective and then go to a patrol base and do it all over again. So, good, strong infantry skill sets, a lot of stress, obviously sleep deprivation, food deprivation. You got to learn how to take care of your body, how to hydrate. That was definitely a tough course. I have a lot of respect for folks that, wear the Ranger tab, and even more respect for folks that, serve in the Ranger Regiment. Some who might not wear a Ranger tab, to me, those are the Rangers, because for them it's a daily duty.
Right. So you didn't do company command in the Army, did you?
I did not. There was a small window where we could have gone from the advanced course to Korea, maybe for 12 months. Knock a company command. I know two guys that did that, and then still had enough time to come back to go to SFAS. But now, we had 4 years before you pin on captain. Now, since the GWAT is over, but they've shortened the time, so you pin on captain in like 3.5 years. So when Special Forces does a call out for year groups of officers, you have a really small window to go to the advanced course, the captain career course, which is 6 months long, usually at Fort Benning for infantry and armor, since they combined them. Obviously, it's out at Leonardwood for engineers, and then ADA and FA for artillery. It's still. And there's no time to be a company commander, to command 120 who is, down on the line, and then still come back and go to SFAS. So you have to make your decision really as a first lieutenant, which way you're going to go. You want to stay in your control branch, or do you want to go into Special Forces?
Yeah. So, so you do your assessment and you do your training. And what's your language?
At the Q course, I studied Russian because I got stationed in Germany. I asked if I could take German. They weren't teaching it. They said Russian or Polish. So I studied Russian at Fort Bragg for 6 months. When I was in college, I actually got a minor in French. So I always kept my French quals up because taking the French DLPT, Defense Language Proficiency Test, is a lot easier than the Russian. Of course, when I got over to Russia, when I got over to Germany with my wife and my new baby, Brianna, we went to Bosnia. Bosnia was the only show in town back in the late 90s. I never went to Russia. I've never been to Russia. So, yeah, okay, thanks, Special Forces. I mean, you made me study, Russian for 6 months, and I got a 2.2 rating, but never went there. So, we needed to have folks that had, that aptitude. But because Bosnia and then later Kosovo was really the only show in town, in Eastern Europe going on before the GWAT, I never used my Russian language at all.
Well, oh well. At least you get to still use your French.
That's correct.
And you might need it if you're going over to Ukraine next week to go vacation.
Thanks. I think I'm going to take a pass.
Oh.
I'm wrapped safely in my Will Marshall DD-214 blanket.
Yeah, me too. Have you seen those blankets? Aren't those cool? I want a Whoopee made out of a 214. Oh my gosh. So as Q course, Robin Sage, training. I mean, that's like I participated in Robin Sage. I was a G guy, right? We were guerrillas. We went out there. It was fun. For us, it was march around in the woods, do what these people tell you, and we kind of played roles, so to speak. I was a brand new private. They took me and made me the platoon sergeant, right? So I was supposed to create confusion and all this stuff, and it was fun and it was wonderful. But you guys were out there, doing fake real world stuff. All right. So I can only imagine that you take that and then the real world stuff. Oh my gosh. I can't imagine the stuff that you've been a part of. What was training like for you? Do you remember those times in training?
Sure. Obviously we did our training in the Q course. Most of it's, based on unconventional warfare, where, you're going to send small teams behind enemy lines to work with partisan forces and build up a guerrilla force. On the back side of that, you're building up an auxiliary and an underground network. So you don't really see all that in the Q course because the Q course is a vehicle to get you through to graduation and get your Green Beret. But once you go into the force, once we got to Bosnia, once the Army really opens up to you, there's the things that when you're at basic training. There's the things that when you go to AIT. And then you think you kind of know, and then you get to your unit. And then your unit, exposes you to some more, and you do a JRTC, or you go to, Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. But once you get to that, that E7, time in grade, and then the captain time in grade, and then to a major, then the force really opens up to you, and you learn about FAO, Foreign Area Officer. You learn about the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. You learn about these other organizations that are out there that the Army is part of, working with FBI or working with the State Department or working with the CIA or working with, NavSpec Warcom, with SEALs, State Department folks. So, that's really where, the Army kind of opens up, and then you kind of see behind the curtain, like, wow, like this is huge. There's a lot of reach back capability, that can help us, with our jobs. And again, that goes back to, building those relationships and creating that trust, where you can, work with these other folks because, they come from different backgrounds than you do. So, it's important to, have a good reputation, build a good reputation, be a person of character, and then be reliable, so that, your superiors and your subordinates, will trust you, when they put you in those places. So, yeah, going to Bosnia, 3 or 4 times, as a young captain, and dealing with, the Bosniaks, dealing with the Serbs, dealing with the Croats, going to Croatia, going to Yugoslavia. It was the former Yugoslavia, obviously Serbia, and then we lived in Republic of Srpska. Spent a lot of time in Sarajevo, a lot of time in Tuzla, that was quite fascinating. To really kind of see it all come together. Far different than being out in the Uwari forest, running around with guerrillas, hitting old Johnson's farm. Now here we were, in meetings with State Department reps, dealing with repatriation, dealing with the Dayton Peace Accords and ethnic cleansing, and just some really horrible situations with graves and mosques and all that. So yeah, quite fascinating.
Do you remember a time where you looked around and you were like, "Oh crap, boys, it's about to get crazy here"?
Yeah, we had an incident at the Birchgrove Bridge in '97 where there was talk that they wanted to kind of create a tri-patriot mayor. So like within Birchgrove where I lived, there would be a mayor that was a Serb, there would be the mayor that was a Croat, and a mayor that was a Muslim. That just didn't go off real well. So there was some power grabs, some land grabs. There was some fighting right across the Birchgrove Bridge. They shot into the Republic of Srpska. So General Grange at the time, had some Apaches fly over low level. Things got a little agitated for a while, settled down after about 2 or 3 days. But everyone's pucker factor went up a little bit on that because these folks had been fighting for a year and a half. Basically, no one did anything about it. The Germans didn't do anything. The French didn't do anything. The Brits didn't do anything. They just let the country start to crumble. But in Sarajevo is a major city surrounded by the Serbs. And they're using artillery pieces for tanks. There's snipers everywhere. Everyone just sat there for a year and a half and just watched this beautiful city. And we watched the Olympics in 1984. The Winter Olympics was in Sarajevo. It's a beautiful city, and it's a beautiful city now. But at the time, it was just a wreck. And we got in there, right after the Brits, early on, to implement the Dayton Peace Accords.
One of the things I always wanted to ask a guy like you is, how far have you seen comms go? Personal and individual communications gear, right? You watched it, you saw it develop to where it is now. We went from, big old brick walkie-talkies and, stuff, right? Tell me about that.
Yeah, we probably had some of the first, PSC-5, SATCOM radios. Obviously, on each Special Forces team, there's 2 communication sergeants. There's 2 weapons sergeants. There's 2 medics. There's 2 weapons sergeants. You have the captain, the team sergeant, and you have an 18 Fox, an intel sergeant. So, the communication sergeants, pretty much run the comms. You can't deploy unless you can show, your battalion, your company and battalion command that you can make comms. So we would do commo shots from Germany back to Arizona. We do commo shots, back to Fort Bragg. Stuff like that. And it was pretty crazy. But then we knew that when we went into Bosnia, we were able to make comms as well. And then when you get down there, we had some SEALs on some of our teams. We had some PJs, Air Force PJs. And then they come with some communication skills as well. So comms has certainly come a long way. And then obviously the reach back to industry when we got to OEF and OIF. You have these, combat mission need statements. These Siemens requests would go in and go, hey, like, we need this commercial off the shelf radio. We know it exists. Motorola told us they have it. Get that thing forward. So we saw, huge improvements in technology. Obviously the MRAP, the mine resistant ambush, prevention vehicles, because our guys were getting decimated with, these horrific IEDs, improved explosive devices. So, working with industry, we've certainly come a long way.
Yeah, yeah. What was the next step? You go to Bosnia and stuff. I was in Kosovo in '99 when we went through Albania and did all of that.
Sure.
What was the next step for you after you went over there?
Then I came back to Fort Bragg. I was down at Fort Benning. I was assigned to Bragg with duty at Fort Benning, and I was the Special Forces recruiter. So my job was to recruit for Special Forces. So probably have a little bit more insight on the recruiting aspect and probably more on the SFAS, because we would work hand in hand with those guys on, what are the aptitudes, what are we looking for, what are the numbers, and that was my job for 2 years. And then while I was there, that's when 9/11, kicked off, and then that, pretty much changed everyone's, wartime footing. So when I left recruiting after 2 years, got promoted to major, I came up to Fort Bragg when I met you. I met you before I even went to, Germany. Brianna was just born, when we were at the church there. But then when we came back to Bragg, in 2001, or 2002, obviously then it was all prep for Afghanistan.
Oh yeah, wow,
Yep.
wow. So tell me a little bit about your family. Brag on Brianna and Austin and Shelley. I remember, look, they were toddlers. Brianna was tiny there in the '90s when we were at the Fayetteville Church of the Nazarene.
That's right. So I have three children, Brianna, Austin, and Miranda. They're all 2 years apart. And when Brianna was in high school at Jack Britt, in Fayetteville, she said, hey, I'd like to apply to the Citadel. And I was like, well, I said, you can. I mean, we'll apply wherever you want. So she applied to the Citadel, did the overnight stay, and then got early acceptance, right when her senior year started. So as the year started going on, I said, you really should apply to West Point. Because obviously, the beauty about West Point is that, being the Federal Military Academy, everyone is going to get an active duty commission. You're going to come in the Army, you're going to serve 5 years, as an officer. When you go through ROTC, you might get, an active duty commission like I did, but you also could get a reserve or National Guard. So I asked her, I'm like, what do you really want? She's like, oh, I want to serve on active duty, guaranteed. So, we looked at some other schools. She did apply to West Point, and she didn't get in initially, but she did get into the West Point Prep School. So each of the academies has a prep school. West Point is actually on the reservation at West Point. The Naval Academy has one in Newport, Rhode Island, and then the Air Force Academy actually has one in Colorado Springs. So she went there for a year. The purpose of the prep school it's a true prep school where you're going to do math and English for 12 months. So she's writing 2 or 3 papers every week, with all the references and all the footnotes. She's doing, geometry, trigonometry, pre-calculus, calculus, algebra 2, so all the stuff that you learn in high school, she's re-bluing in math. And then she got accepted to West Point, the following year, and then started her 4 years at West Point. The cool thing about going to the prep school is because it's an actual Army unit. Half of the school is recruited athletes. The other half is active duty soldiers. That smart specialist that's in your motor pool, or he drives for the sergeant major. And they're like, you really should go in the Army. You should become an officer. Half of the prep school kids are active duty soldiers. So she actually gets credit for 1 year in the service, going through the prep school. So she graduated, after the 4 years there, and then she wanted logistics. So she went quartermaster, and then she wanted Fort Bragg. She got Fort Bragg. And so she's at Bragg now. She did a year as a platoon leader in the ordnance platoon. And then she just recently took over as an XO of a rigger company. And they sent her to rigger school. She graduated from that. And then after she gets her 15 jumps, probably sometime this summer, she'll be going to jump master school.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And then, Austin was right behind her. So, when she went to the prep school, we would bring him up there. Her freshman year, we'd bring him up there. They would see it. Miranda would come as well. And, Austin's like walking around, looking around. He's like, Dad, I'd smoke this place. And I was like, what are you talking about? I said, it's hard to get in. It's even harder to stay. And he's like, well, I'm going to apply. So one of his buddies he played baseball with was already at West Point. So Austin applied, totally crushed his SATs, crushed his ACTs. He had like a, I don't know, like a 1500 SAT, and then he had like a 33 on his ACT. So he went right in. He didn't have to go to the prep school. So when they were at West Point, because Brandon had to burn a year at prep, she was only a year ahead of him at West Point. So she was a sophomore when he came in as a plebe. And so it was kind of cool having them together there at the same school. And then my brother that I mentioned earlier, he got assigned to West Point as an instructor in the Department of Military Instruction. So him and his family are up there with their 3 kids, and they were kind of a built-in sponsor for them. And then Miranda's our youngest daughter. She didn't want anything to do with the military. Certainly didn't want anything to do with West Point. And she is a sophomore now at Liberty, which is a Christian university up in Lynchburg, Virginia. And she's doing really well.
Yay! Yay, yay, yay. That is awesome. That's so good to hear. And you and Shelly, y'all high school sweethearts? Tell me y'all's love story a little bit.
No, we met when I was a lieutenant. I was at Fort Campbell, and I just went down to Nashville for a weekend, with the guys, and she was out, with some girls. And, we just met, got her phone number, and then we just started dating. 3 years later, we got married. We've been married. It'll be 28 years coming up next month. So no, not high school sweethearts, but she is a day older than I am. She was born on March 31st, 1968, down in Miami, and I was born the next day, April Fool's Day, right up there in Brockton, Mass. So
Oh my gosh, that's
kind of
great.
strange that she robbed the cradle, by
Yeah.
24 hours.
Mm-mm-mm. She had that reach back capability. She
Apparently so.
she robbed the cradle. Mm-mm-mm. Oh, Foxy. Oh,
Yeah.
Foxy. So tell me about like jumping out of airplanes and stuff. Like you're a jump master. Are you Halo and scuba and all those other badges?
No, I never went to free fall school. Now that free fall school is actually a part of the Q course, so everyone that goes through the qualification course, they will go out to Yuma and do the 5 or 6 week jump course out there. I never got a chance to go through free fall school. Once you become a major, and you're commanding, units, or you're the operations officer or the XO, you don't want to steal a slot from an NCO that's going to have, or a young captain that's going to have, 4 or 5 more years. So never went to dive school, down in Key West, or the free fall school, which was fine. I mean, it didn't really fit my job description. But yeah, stayed on jump status, my whole career. Even in staff positions when I was down at SOCOM, or at staff positions at USAC, I would jump. So when it all was over with, I had 150 static line jumps, right on target, right at 150, which means I probably had 75 that were no-goes, flying around the aircraft or weather, whatever. So I probably would have had a lot more. But, it's just, I even tell the kids now, it's cool to have the Weather Channel. Like, it's going to rain in 2 days. If it's raining in Alabama right now, well, that's going to be at Fort Bragg tomorrow. So you can just call the jump right now. We didn't have the benefit of that.
I remember many days sitting up there at Pope in the ADAG office talking to the ground liaison officer, trying to make weather decisions as to whether we were going to be able to fly or not. Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah.
Mm-mm-mm. So what was it, tell me about like the essence of a Green Beret soldier versus a regular forces soldier. Like many of my guests and people, we talk about how an airborne soldier is different than a leg. Say, what was it about a Green Beret? Can you characterize it for me?
Well, certainly when I came in, folks would assess as lieutenants going to become captains, so you've already been in the Army for 4 years. And then we used to assess E4s and E5s to come in. And then after the GWAT started, when I was the recruiter down at Fort Benning, we opened it up to the 18 X-ray program, where we were actually doing in-service recruiting the E4s and E5s, but we were also getting folks coming off the street because each of the special forces groups grew by another battalion. So instead of having 3 battalions per SF group, we had 4. So we needed more folks. So, the beauty of SF back then was that there was no privates, there's no specialists, there's no lieutenants. So we had a more seasoned individual, a little bit more mature, had already, done some reps at the 82nd Hunter 1st, 10th Mountain, Hunter Liggett, maybe Ranger Battalion guy. So the average guys coming out of the Q course were already 25 to 27 years old. So just that in of itself, I mean, you compare a 27-year-old man to an 18-year-old man, who's, young, dumb, full of piss and vinegar, like that's good. Like we still need that private, we still need Marines to do Marine things, we still need SEALs to do SEAL things. But, when you're going to send small teams to foreign countries to work with their special forces or their dignitaries or their State Department folks, you need folks that are a little bit more seasoned, a little bit more mature. Not going to just go into the embassy and, and break things. So, that's kind of what I liked. I mean, I liked working with, a little bit more mature folks. Again, we can reach back and get a platoon of 82nd. We can have a company of Rangers attached to us to service targets that we need. But, the mission was just a little bit different. Dealing with, foreign countries, working with through languages, working with interpreters, and then, working more on strategic objectives, not so much tactical objectives. If that answers your question.
Yeah. What's it like to be? So I've heard special forces teams described as, the nation's mini ambassadors, right? The nation sends a SF team in the cover of darkness, and you're walking around and you're ambassadors of the nation, kind of in a covert way. Have you felt that? Do you feel that? Have you been in a situation where you were that tip of the spear kind of guy out there in a country, influencing our nation's foreign policy?
Sure. Both in Bosnia and then even on the early stages in Afghanistan, 2002, 2003, we're the only American presence there. So all they know is, war for 10 years or 20 years or 40 years. And then, you're the first American they've ever seen. So whether you're implementing the Dayton Peace Accords or you're there to, create peace or, go after the Taliban, those partners are relying on you. Even when I got to Afghanistan, a lot of them didn't even know why we were there. They don't have televisions, they don't have CNN, they don't have internet. So we would bring up on a laptop and show them like the World Trade Centers. I mean, they'd never seen a skyscraper. They didn't know what New York City was or what DC was, and they didn't really care. Like, all right, well, these people were from Egypt. These people are from, Mecca. I mean, these people aren't from Afghanistan. It's like, well, I know you don't understand all the geopolitics, and you have to really get into it with everybody, but dealing with the governors, of each of the provinces in Afghanistan, you are the only link, military and diplomatic link. So that keeps you on your toes. You have to understand the political ramifications of what you say, what you do, and then the things that you do, you have to have answers for. And then, of course, obviously, our chain of command backed us up. I mean, we have orders. And, again, we have UCMJ. Like I said, I mean, to me, the Army's easy. You stay between the pipes. You're going to be all right. And if you have questions, ask. That's what gets most people in trouble. And I used to have this old ops sergeant major, and at the end of each email, he would put his name, his little signature block, and he'd say, "If you have questions, ask." And it's like, it seems so simple, but it's like, guys would go out at Fort Bragg to run a range, and they're dropping bombs, they're dropping mortars, and it's like, dude, what are you doing out there? This is a pistol range, Oh, I thought we could just get a range and just start doing stuff. It's like, no. If you ask questions up front, we wouldn't have range control crawling up our fourth point of contact, So just because you're an SF guy and, you think you're a cool guy, you signed for a pistol range. You can't be calling in F-16s, So if you have questions, ask, because obviously, you don't know what you're doing, And and that's something that you can use with your kids. It's like your kids are like, Dad, I don't know what to do. It's like, no, no, no. I know what you can't do. I already know. Show me what you can do. You know, that's the trick. So if you don't know what you're doing, just stop, ask, and you'll just save a whole bunch of pain, probably a couple Article 15s, you know, maybe a relief of clause NCOER,
Hey, hey, so tell me about, you bring up the relief for cause NCOER.
Yeah.
Tell, tell me about mentors. Who mentored you? Who did you mentor? Who were those folks that really took you under their wing?
Yeah, I had a mentor, in special forces. Probably my closest one was my battalion commander, Tim Slump. He was from Tennessee, a big, tall guy. I was his company commander. I was his S3, his operations officer. We deployed, twice to Afghanistan. And then we were put on raid attachment. He was the deputy commander. I was the XO when third group went forward in 2005. So, we spent a lot of time together, a lot of deployments together, a lot of training together. And he was probably my, biggest, mentor, life coach, huge influence, good Christian man. And, I just learned a lot from him. And then I can't say I had any strict mentors where, I would reach out. I mean, there were always folks to my left and right that you could reach back to. There's certain people that I wanted to emulate. And then, I knew that, we kind of had an open door policy if, I ever had to reach out to them. But now, I mentor obviously my kids. Obviously my son's at Ranger School now, but I just sent 7 postcards to Ranger School today because one of my captains that was killed in Afghanistan in 2004, Dan Eggers, his son graduated from the Citadel back in May, and he's actually in an Austin's Ranger School class right now. So very close still with the Eggers family. His other brother's going to graduate from the Citadel this spring. So I mentor a lot of young lieutenants, a lot of young captains. I go up to Norwich, every couple of years for homecoming, and I've reached out to some folks that were on the Mountain Cold Weather team that I was with, and I mentor them. So most of it's military related. A local girl here wanted to get into West Point. They reached out to us 2 years ago. They knew that I had 2 kids there, and she just got her nomination from Senator Tim Scott and Lindsey Graham, and then got accepted to West Point last week. So really happy for that family as well. So it's kind of a younger generation. I still have that reach back. I still do consulting for the military now. I got a work trip this week coming up to Fort Polk, and then end of March I'll head out to Alaska. The Army's doing a big exercise up in Alaska to exercise their Arctic warfare capability. We're sending some SF teams up there as well. So that's kind of my realm of mentorship. It's important to me, a way to give back, a way to help folks out. And again, I know what you can't do, but, show me what you can do. And I challenge them to, to reach, set some goals. So I actually wrote a few notes here I wanted to share.
Yeah.
Maybe you'd be interested in hearing that.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
All right. Obviously, being a leader, you read a lot of secular things, a lot of spiritual things. But, one old life maxim, the 3 essentials to a successful life. People always ask, like, well, what does it take to have a successful life? Or what are some things I should focus on? And the first one is to have a meaningful career or profession. Work that has a purpose, provides enjoyment. Obviously, it's going to provide some money, but also from room for growth. So one successful, tip for a successful life, have a meaningful career profession. Number 2 is to have someone to love and someone that loves you back, So, I mean, again, I've been married for 27 years, 28 coming up. Someone that treats you with respect, and then, you guys are equal partners. You got to be able to form that partnership. And then the third thing, it sounds simple, but sometimes it's not, is always have something to look forward to. In the Army, for us, it was always a new job. Every 2 or 3 years, you get a new job. Sometimes it came with a permanent change of station, a PCS, and you'd end up moving. So we moved from Bragg to Germany to Georgia, back to Bragg to Tampa, back to Bragg. For us, Fort Bragg was always kind of the center of the universe, probably still is, but have something to look forward to. But that could be like going to a concert. That could be, going to a new movie coming out, or a vacation or a special trip. So those three things, a meaningful career with that, a profession that has purpose, someone that loves you and that loves you back, and then always have something to look forward to. Those are three kind of secular tips to successful life. Some
Amen.
books I was, you wanted to comment on any of that?
No, no, keep going. I love it. I love it. Keep going. I love it.
All right, a couple of books that I was going to recommend. I do read, consider myself pretty well read, but some ones that kind of galvanized me is a book written by Gale Sayers. He was a running back for the Chicago Bears. His running back mate was Brian Piccolo. You might have heard the movie Brian song, but he
Right.
wrote a book. Gale Sayers wrote a book years ago called I Am Third. Okay, so you're like, I am third. What is that all about? Well, to him, God is first, my family is second, and I am third. So I always kind of use that in my life. God comes first. My family. Once I built a family, they came second, and then I am third. So I would recommend reading that book. It gives you a lot of perspective, on life, on living. Obviously, here's this professional football player. Had a fantastic career, but this is how he kind of ordered things in his life, and it's a very powerful message. There's another book I recommend. It's called The Richest Man in Babylon. I don't know if you've ever read it, but it was written by George Clason back in 1926, and it's really been released probably every 5 years since then. It's really more of a financial aid book, but it's cool because as you're reading it, it gets you wrapped up in the story because you want to find out what are these keys. What did the richest man in Babylon know? So it's a story kind of around the turn of the century with Jesus Christ, in the Middle East. And the whole book boils down to a part of what you earn is yours to keep. All right. So when I talk to folks, especially young folks, young lieutenants, young cadets, young soldiers, I was like, imagine if you kept 10% of every paycheck. So go all the way back to when you had a paper route, you sold your baseball cards, you worked at the car wash, or you made pizzas, or imagine if you kept 10% of each of those paychecks all the way into adulthood. Like, wouldn't that just be fantastic? And of course, everyone says, yes, like, yeah, that'd be great, but, kind of life gets in the way, or you get that new car, or you get your first car, and, gas prices go up, then you get the girlfriend, you want to go to pizza, and, so your paycheck, wherever you work in Domino's or Sears or Marshall's, wherever, most people don't keep that 10%. But the cool thing about The Richest Man in Babylon is that, it teaches you about, investing. It teaches you about tithing, and then it teaches you about, learning about compound interest, and then getting financial advice. So, now, in the new neighborhood I live in now, it's mostly, 30 to 40-year-olds. People start talking about Bitcoin, and all these kind of fantastic things that are out there. Well, I'm not a Bitcoin guy, and I'm not saying that I couldn't be, but I prefer to kind of play it safe. But I do think it's important for the people that I mentor and people that talk to me is, to be a good steward of your funds. So yes, you should invest. And it's good that the Army came up with this new TSP program. So they don't really have the legacy retirement where you do your 20 years, you get your 50%. If you do your 20 years, you're going to get like 30%, but you're going to invest in this TSP, this savings plan, where they're going to have matching funds where you put in money automatically, and then the government will match you as well. And there's power in that. And of course, when you get a regular job like I have now, if you learn about 401ks, there's Roth IRAs, there's other investment, things. And I'm not a financial advisor, but, that's one thing that I recommend folks, get interested in and learn about. And, even when it's all done, let's say the stock market crashes tomorrow and it all goes back to zero. Okay, I'll start over. It's okay. Like that was just 10% that kind of went off the top, so 10% goes to the church. That's my tithe. There's a lot of power in tithing. I can't explain it, but there's just a blessing upon blessings when you tithe. And then when you invest 10%, just let the compound interest take care of itself. You'll have a really nice nest egg, when you get to be, in your 50s and 60s like us. So I would recommend The Richest Man in Babylon. And then two other books that are really easy reads is The 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard and Spencer Johnson. Have you ever read that
I have
one?
not read that. No.
Yeah, it looks comes like in a pamphlet. You could read it just sitting on the throne one night. But the 1 Minute Manager boils down to give 1 minute of praisings. You should be able to give 1 minute of praisings to a coworker or peer. Give 1 minute of butt chewings, in a minute. And then on one sheet of paper, you should be able to list your goals, for the next week, for the next month. So it's a really good goal setting book, but it's very powerful. And if you incorporate that into your life, into your mentoring, into your job, it can be very powerful. Because just saying, oh, obviously you work, in your industry, and when you have a coworker and he misses a pickup, or he drops his tools, or he shows up and doesn't have his tools, it's like, dude, we need to do a little counseling here. So I'm going to pull up my 1 Minute Manager. This is what you're responsible for. This is your goals. This is what you told me you're going to do, and you're not doing it. So you should be able to do praises and butt chewings on that one in a 1 minute. And then the other one that's also written by Spencer Johnson is called Who Moved My Cheese? Have you read that?
I have. I love that book.
So Who Moved My Cheese? I mean, that's dealing with change. And to me, it's about being resilient and always looking for good cheese. So the way the book breaks down is that there's two mice and there's two little mini Lilliputians, and they live in this. I kind of describe it as like a dollhouse, and it has great cheese. I mean, there's Roquefort, there's blue cheese, there's Camembert, and it's great. And then one day they show up to the cheese room, and the cheese is all gone. So the two mice, they're just kind of arguing with each other, like, what are we going to do? We're going to starve to death, whatever. The two little Lilliputians are like, hey, there's no more cheese. So we're going to leave here, and we're going to go find some new cheese. So they start walking through the maze, and they're going to find some cheese. Now, it's not the good stuff, but it'll sustain them. It'll get them through until they can find the good cheese. And then, unfortunately for the mice, they just keep arguing and bickering, and then they end up getting separated. So, to me, when I was given that out to read, when I was a battalion commander, 7th Special Forces Group moved from Bragg down to Eglin Air Force Base. And I was called by my group commander, my brigade commander from Afghanistan. He's like, hey, you've got to move your battalion across the street to 7th Group and occupy those buildings, because there's open buildings, there's open barracks, and at Fort Bragg, it's a total land grab. The MPs want it, 18th Airborne Corps wants it, Advanced Airborne School wants it, occupy by force. So he's like, Fox, I know it's Thanksgiving week, but you've got to move your battalion and occupy by force. Because at the time, it was actually legitimately still owned by Special Forces. But because they left, hey, the property's 9/10 of ownership. So over Thanksgiving weekend, we got trucks and Ford 150s and trailers, and we moved across the street to occupy 7th Special Forces Group. Now, having read Who Moved My Cheese, I mean, here someone is basically moving my cheese for me, but I have to go and occupy. So I can complain about it, I can whine about it, I can tell my boss no, probably get fired. And then my subordinates, I mean, they have to get on the train too. It's like, guys, I know you're going to go to Norfolk, you're going to go to Charleston, you're going to go to Savannah, but we have got to move. So when we moved the battalion over the next 5 days, there was actually goodness in that, because we went through the safes. We had these 700-pound safes that had CONOPS from like 1994. I mean, we got rid of so much crap. I mean, the manuals that are all digitized, like, we cleaned out all the crap. And then when we made the move, it was all pure. We just moved the gear we needed to move. And, we got some paint, we got some new carpet, we hung the TVs, we set up the jock. I mean, it actually was good. But had I not read Who Moved My Cheese, to look for the goodness, like this is kind of a crap mission. I don't like getting thrown stuff on me and canceling leave. But, if we have to move, let's make it a good move. And let's get rid of a lot of the the old stuff that we don't need.
Oh
So,
wow.
so
You
continue. Go ahead.
no, you got more? You got more? I want to hear more.
Yeah, I got more.
All right. All right, let's hear it.
I don't know who's still listening, but so obviously I don't learn all this on my own. I mean, you read and you talk to other people and stuff. And some other things that I've read: 5 things to be successful, or to have a successful life. I already talked about the top 3, but one was having a joy, love, passion, for your work. We kind of talked about that before. For your country, for God, and for life, and then find that meaningful career. So, for me, that was the military. Obviously, coming out of the military, I went back into military contracting. So, yeah, I took off the uniform, but I mean, I still have my connections at Bragg. I still have my, my Nipper computer, and I go up to Fort Bragg every once in a while. But I've always been very passionate about, working for the Department of Defense and working for our nation. And that's been meaningful to me. And obviously, my kids have taken that on. They want to start their careers in the military, and they're very proud of that. And then even my daughter, who's at Liberty, she's getting a degree in counseling and entrepreneurship. So something different, but I think she'll find some meaningfulness in that. Number 2 is work hard. Okay. As a result of one's passions, this can come easily, and it's a byproduct of one's passion. So once you find that meaningful career, you'll find it easy to work hard. I mean, you'll want to work hard. You'll want to do better, earn more, rise up through the ranks. And there's nothing wrong with hard work. I mean, that's pretty much how this country was built, So that one's there. And then, number 3 is balance. And a lot of people have problem with balance. You have to have a work balance. You need a family balance, a self balance, physical fitness. You need to rest, and then you need to, give thanks. So, how that balance works, it's different for every person. Some people are workaholics. I am not a workaholic. I'm more of a hard worker. So when there's work to be done, I'll go and tackle that. But I don't just try to fill up my calendar with, fluff and buff. It's like, no, you give me a task, I'm on task, complete the task. All right, what's the next task? But finding that work-life balance, your family needs you, and I was gone for a long time. I mean, I was gone for a good 5 years, of my kids, growing, and my wife had to, take ownership and take that family mantle. And then when I came back, after, several trips to Afghanistan and a whole year in Iraq, I told my kids I would take them all on a trip to Europe by myself. So I took Brianna first. She was the eldest, and she was a senior. I told her, hey, you plan the trip, and I will take you, and I will show you Europe through my eyes. We flew on a hop to Germany, and then we went to Paris for 4 days. We went to southern France, to the Riviera for 4 days, and then we went to Italy for 4 days. We stayed in youth hostels. We got our Eurail tickets here, and then brought them with us. And, I showed her Europe. And it was good bonding experience. We got to see a lot of things. We got to go to a lot of places I'd already been, but I showed her how to do Europe on the cheap. And that was really time well spent. 2 years later, I did a trip with Austin. We went to Paris, then we went to London, and then up to Oxford and Cambridge, and then back to Paris, and then back to Germany. I got to show him where he was born in Germany. We went to 1st Battalion, 10th Special Forces Group, where I was stationed. His formative years, but obviously he had no recollection. And then a year later, I took Miranda. We did kind of the same trip with Austin. We went to France, and then Great Britain, and then back to France. So the reason I'm sharing that with you is that, to me, because I was gone so long and had been away in combat, I probably wasn't my best version of myself when I came home. It's difficult when you're deployed and you come home and you're trying to take charge again, and you still have the stresses of work. You still have the stresses of your combat losses, dealing with your Gold Star families and all that. But I was missing out as being the dad, so I wanted to do something special with my kids. And, years later, other friends of mine have called and said, hey, Fox, like, you really inspired me. I can't take my kid to Europe, but I took my daughter on a 3-day trip to Montreal, or we went and saw the Grand Canyon, or we went to Branson, Missouri, just me and my son, And, and I even share it with my neighbors here, and they're like, wow, that's like very powerful. Like, that's something that, my dad didn't do with me. Didn't have the time. I kind of grew up in 2 separate families. It was me and my brother, Mike. and then there's a 12-year separation between Greg and Jeremy. So my parents had same parents, but they had two sets of sons. But two were born in the '60s, and then two were born in the '80s. They had a break in service there. But I've inspired a lot of folks to do something special with their kids one-on-one, and I think that's important. So finding that work-life balance, it's important. Obviously, physical fitness, whatever that means to you, whether it's a lift day, a swim day, a rest day, a stretch day, find out what is good for you and what works for you. Next, I know we talked a little about networking and friends and friendships, but it's guard your inner circle. So who do you spend your time with? Positive people you can trust and can trust you. So I've developed, I have a huge network. Obviously, I have, hundreds of associates or folks that I know, but then I have a small, band of friends. But even inside that, I have what I kind of call it my inner circle. And it's 4 or 5 folks that I can call, I can rely upon, I can trust them, share things kind of as a confidant. My wife is in that inner circle, but sometimes it doesn't have to be your spouse. I mean, you don't have to have a spouse to have an inner circle. None of these people know that they're in my inner circle. Like we don't all get together. We're not like the 10 from the Lord's discipline. We're all going to like get together and, take down the school. But to me, it's a special group of friends that I know that I could call if I had problems, if I had a life decision or a job change was coming up or something I needed to bounce something off of. I have a small inner circle. And I think that, that should be protected. Again, they don't even know they're part of it. But I know who they are. I don't share it with anybody else. They could probably guess that they were part of it, but maybe they aren't, but I think you should have that small network of friends, those folks you can rely on. They could be a neighbor. They could be a relative. But some of those bonds are actually, even more powerful than family. And they might not even know it. But, if you can have, I tell folks, if you can go to college and you can graduate with like 2 or 3 really good friends, you did well. If you graduate from high school with 1 or 2 really good buddies, guys or girls, you did well. It's unfortunate that you can go to a school of 5,000 kids like I did and graduate and not remember anybody. Reach back to anybody. I mean, that's just unfortunate. But you don't want to graduate and have 1,000 friends. It's like, yeah, but are they really your friends? So there's got to be a balance. I mean, there's got to be some trust. Backwards and forwards. But these friends. I mean, if they called me in the middle of the night and said, "Hey, my dad's sick," or "Hey, I don't think my mom's going to make it," or "Hey, my husband was in a car accident. Like, I need someone to talk to." I know they could rely on me. That type of that friendship. I think that's important. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was gifts and talents. The Bible talks about talents, but we all have a gift. We all have gifts, and you need to learn how to cultivate these gifts and share your gifts, but also protect your gifts. You just can't give it away freely. So it could be the gift of music, the gift of athleticism, the gift of teaching, coaching, mentoring, the gift of caring. My wife's a nurse. She's worked in all different facets of nursing, to include hospice. But we all have a talent, and we need to learn what those talents are, and we need to be able to harness that talent and protect it, and then share it. So for me, I'm really good at land navigation. So I've cultivated that craft. I've developed some lanes, and I can teach map reading and help folks, because most kids coming in the military, they don't even realize how important it is. They're like, "Oh, I got a GPS, got my Apple Watch." It's like, well, one EFP by the Chinese, and it's going to wipe out all our satellites. So you're going to go back to charts and darts. You got to drop artillery. You got to call for fire. You got to know where you are. You got to know where you're going. You need a map and compass. So that's the talent that I have. I'm a really good swimmer. I swam all through high school, all through college. I still swim now, and I share that talent with guys in my neighborhood. I don't really teach swimming anymore, but I do teach triathletes and other athletes to swim better, more efficiently, and that's something that I like. I also like to play poker. I run a monthly poker night down here at my house in Charleston. And it's not high stakes. I mean, Michael Jordan's not coming in here dropping $10,000. It's just a small, It's more like a freaking knitting club, where we, a bunch of guys just all get together and we play cards for a few hours.
John Daly and throwing down, millions.
No, none of that. No one's gonna lose. No one's gonna lose a house payment. No Jaguar keys are going in the middle. And so we talk about time. So your talents kind of break down into three things. We all have these things. We have our time, our talent, and our treasure. All right. So your time is precious. You can volunteer. Yeah, you can volunteer. Shelly and I volunteer at a warming shelter. Some of the nights get really cold down here, so there's a warming shelter our church is plugged into. So you can volunteer your time. You can volunteer your talent. Whatever your talent is. Talent at empathy, talent for storytelling. Talent for being Will Marshall and having this cool equipment that's set up to do storytelling. And then there's your treasure. So your treasure is like, how much can you donate? So, your college or your high school, they always call you and like, hey, Foxy, how much are you going to donate this year? Or we're building a new soccer stadium, or we're building a new this or that, and, you have to, guard your talent, because there's a true thing called donor fatigue, where they always go back to the same donor. They always go back to that same guy or gal. And, your treasure is still your treasure, and you have to just decide how you're going to dole it out. So if you give to Save the Children, and then, the police fund calls you tonight on some robocall, we've had these, we're trying to buy body armor, or, we need, there's a hurricane in Paducah, Kentucky, we need funds. It's like, well, you have to harness your talents, your treasure, your time. And then how you do that is up to you. But, we all have those three things, and then how you use those, again, that's up to you. So those are kind of some of my, my life quips that I wanted to share.
Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate that. It's an honor to know that you took some time and prepared that. I'm very appreciative of that, very much, and enjoyed it. I definitely have been exposed to Who Moved My Cheese. It's a great little book, and it's a wonderful thing. One of the books that Mr. Jim gave me that I love was called Zap. Did he ever tell you about the book called Zap?
No, sir.
Yeah, that was a good book. That was an interesting thing. Tell me, Chris, a little bit, if you don't mind, about your spirituality. You and I spent many hours together in a Christian church, in the 90s.
Sure. I grew up Catholic. And then, kind of had a falling out when I went off to college. But then when I got, in the Army, church was still a big part of my life. Just didn't know if the Catholic Church was going to be the itch and the scratch that I needed. But, when I met Shelly, she was going to a Nazarene college. I didn't know anything about Nazarenes. I did know about the Baptists. So to me, the Nazarenes are just a strict version of the Baptist church. When she was telling me how, they couldn't see PG-13 movies, or she grew up in Miami. They'd go to a pool day, and from like 3 to 5, the girls would go with their bathing suits, and then they'd all leave, and then the boys would go. And I was like, what's that all about? I mean, I was on a swim team almost my whole life. I mean, there was girls in bathing suits everywhere, but it was just like a stricter version. But anyway, the church became very, big part of my life, my relationship with Jesus, very, very strong. It always kind of centered me and focused me. So I always told my kids growing up, I said, on Sunday morning, you will always know where your dad is. Your dad's in church. Does it happen every Sunday? Yeah, it happens every Sunday. If we're on vacation, or if I'm at an airport, yeah, okay, maybe it doesn't happen. But 360 days out of the year on Sunday, or 52 weeks, I'm in the church. And that was just important to me to for them to be able to see where the parents were, how are they training us up. That was one book that Jim did share, How to Train Up a Child, had to do with spanking and touching your hand or interrupting parents and stuff like that. But anyway, church is still very, very important to us. We go to a non-denominational church here. We went to a huge Baptist church when we lived down in Tampa. That was kind of like a mega church. At first, it was a little overbearing, but we obviously built really good relationships in Sunday school. And the Sunday school that fit us the best in Tampa was the biker Sunday school group. They didn't have a Jim Bayless group, with a bunch of cool folks, but the bikers were really they had like the best coffee and the best donuts, but they had the best message as well. We bounced around to several, and then now we go to Seacoast. Seacoast is a huge mega church here in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, and they have about 7 locations throughout the Carolinas, North and South Carolina. But their pastor, Greg Surratt, he's established what's called the Ark, and they actually plant churches around the country and around the world. And I think they just went over 700. So over the last 30 years, when he's been building this church, they do church plants. So we've got very involved in the church here. The music is top shelf. They have this one singer, Brandon Lake. He just won an Emmy Award for some music, or Grammy. So they have really good music. There's probably 2,000 people, in the amphitheater on Sundays. And then Shelly and I are part of the women's shelter. We haven't really plugged into a small group right now. But the small groups, they'll go for like 4 or 5 months, and then they'll break apart, and then they'll start up again. So it's really, a way to plug into the church and get to know folks. But we know a lot of folks here anyway, since we moved down here 2.5 years ago. And so the church is really, a big part of our life, our lifestyle, and obviously that Christian walk.
You mentioned losing a soldier in combat and the Gold Star families. Tell me about that. How I stood in front of a group of soldiers 3 different times in my career as a first sergeant and called roll at a memorial service for my soldiers that was no longer going to be in formation again. So I know, dealing with loss, everybody has different experiences. Is there a way you could share some of yours?
Well, I've lost 12 soldiers, under my command. The first time I lost 5 soldiers in Afghanistan, both to near ambushes, one to, IED attack. It's difficult dealing with it, when you're overseas, but you have to go right back to work. You have to get right back to training. You got to get the guys right back out the door again. So, you deal with it, and you kind of put it away. And the families are the ones that really have to deal with it even more, because they're the ones that are back at Bragg. They're the ones that have to go to the memorial service. They're the ones that'll go to Arlington. My wife had actually been even on a couple notifications where, right after the notification team moves out, that the chaplain comes in with the wives and sets up the care chain for kids, meals, all the way through the funeral. So it never goes away. Obviously being the commander, I would call from Afghanistan or from Iraq, back and talk to the family member as much as I could share. Obviously every loss is devastating. Coming to Special Forces, we're a very small bunch. We're a very small branch, probably about the size of an MP branch. Everyone's been specially selected and trained, and we're very close. So, it's not just a name. It's not just Johnson from 3rd Platoon. It's guys that we know, guys that we've trained with, guys that we've been with for years. And then this last trip to Afghanistan, 2011, 2012, I lost 7 guys. One of the guys we lost was on the first night, Sergeant Stevens. We were in a big fight down in Wardak province. We knew the enemy was there, massive fighting. And then over the next 2 weeks, we lost 3 more soldiers. And then I lost 2 soldiers during an insider attack, again, in eastern Afghanistan, where an Afghan soldier jumped in the back of a vehicle and mowed down the ODA. Pretty much wiped out everyone on the team. 2 people were killed. They eventually maneuvered on him and killed him. But I had to send 2 ODAs just to the base, just to put the bodies and put the injured on medevac birds. So again, it's hard. You rely on your faith, you rely on your command sergeant major, and those that are closest to you. And then, we still maintain, some relationships with those Gold Star families today. Chris Fockel, his dad, and I are very close. His dad, develops these Junior's bullet pens. You've probably seen them. They're made out of 7.62 rounds. So Jeff Fockel out in Colorado Springs, he makes these to honor his son. So I talk about Chris a lot. It's hard. That's the nature of command. Having a good Christian faith has got me through, a lot of those dark times. A lot of the folks on that small circle of trust I told you about, that I can share things with. That's helped. And then, obviously having supportive wife and family. But yes, relationships don't go away. I mean, I'll always remember those men. And, my task is to live honorably as they would do for me. So, as I continue my life, continue my work, continue my mentoring, continue my reputation, I'm going to live honorably for them. I know that they would have done the same if I was killed downrange.
Amen. Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about, one of those heroes or one of your heroes. Tell me what happened, the how they maybe got injured or got hurt or something or got killed. I don't know.
Um, well, they're all different. They're all. Some of them are classified. I don't want to get really into it, but I have had some soldiers that have been seriously wounded that have overcome their injuries. One's Nick Lavery. He's very active on Facebook. Even has his own. He has a book which came out. But he got shot in the face when we first got there. Got a silver star. Got a bronze star. Later, he was shot again. Survived that, stayed downrange with us, and then he was part of the insider attack. He actually ended up losing his right leg, and he is recovered from that. Dozens of surgeries. He's married. His wife's a master sergeant in the Army. He's a warrant officer now. He switched over and went warrant, but he was the first prosthetic or amputee to graduate from the combat diver school down in Key West. So this guy, massive bodybuilder, still trained up, went to the hardest school that we have in the Army, passed that. And, now he's still, promoting, his work, his legacy to, his guys that he lost, on that day. He's, had been deployed twice to Africa, and now he's in 5th Special Forces Group out at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, still driving on. So he and I are still quite close. He's from Massachusetts as well. You don't meet too many folks in the Army from Massachusetts, but Nick is one of those guys. And I'm just really proud of, the way he has recovered. He stayed on active duty even as an amputee. I mean, he lost his entire leg. I mean, he's got like a little nub, at the top of his pelvic. But, married, to a master sergeant. She's getting ready to retire, and he has 2 beautiful boys. And, he really epitomizes, the Special Forces soldier to me. Just the things that he's taken on, and didn't take a med board, wouldn't let the Army push him out. He's going to live, again honorably, for the memory of his soldiers as well.
I ask people sometimes if you had to live a particular assignment over again, or a year again, or a duty station or something. If you had something to do again, what would you do?
Right before I got selected for battalion command, I was told that I was selected to take a MIT mission, military transition team. So back in the surge in 2009, 2010 in Iraq, we had MIT teams and FIPITs, Federal Police Training Teams. It was like a hodgepodge. They threw these teams together. We all came from disparate units, disparate services. And we trained together for 8 weeks out at Fort Riley, Kansas. I was part of the Big Infantry, Big Red 1, and we went to Iraq for a year. If I could get a do-over, or if I could have told Branch no, that probably would have been the one. Now, on a selfish side, I hadn't been to Iraq yet. I'd been to Afghanistan twice, and my brother had been to Iraq. So I was like, all right, well, I will get to see Iraq. I will get to see, serve in OIF to see what that's all about. But the folks that were on the mission with me, they didn't want to be there. They were pretty much voluntold. They didn't really want to take the training very seriously at Fort Riley. And then when we got to in the country, I quickly got our team aligned with JSOC, and we started going on missions with the Ranger Regiment. And that pretty much scared those dudes to death. I mean, they thought, man, we got the Special Forces colonel. He's going to get us killed. We're going on these targets. We were taking down 20 targets in 3 days. I mean, when you're with the Ranger Regiment, it's nonstop. I mean, they put the pedal to the metal. Now, on their side, like they only do 120-day deployments. So when you hear about these Rangers and they're like, oh yeah, Staff Sergeant Will Marshall has 19 deployments. And you're like, 19 deployments? He's only 25. Well, they do 120 or 90-day deployments. So they'll do 2 in a year, sometimes 3. But we were running hard with JSOC, just taking down targets. And, with our Iraqi, police team that we had. And my guys really weren't even up for that. We got in a couple firefights. But I told them, I'm like, hey, we have quick reaction force. There's medevac birds that are in the air. You can't even, like, if anything happens, we're going to be fine. And I just couldn't convince them, because they were not combat arms type soldiers. They just wanted to go to Iraq, pass out batteries, give a first aid class, do a mout, just do a flow drill with blanks, kind of like a basic training. I'm like, no, like this Iraqi unit's been fighting since, the 90s. I mean, they can already fight. They just sent us over here to be their partner. And so they weren't up for that at all. So that was a very difficult year for me. And that was a 12-month mission to Iraq. And then when we came out of that, I did a year at Bragg and then rolled into battalion command. So I'm glad I did go to Iraq. I got to see what that was all about. I still serve my nation. But again, it was a year away from my family. And I mean, the Army told me to take this mission. I mean, I didn't really have a choice. So yeah, if I could get one do over again, I wouldn't have gone on that.
Amen. I hear you. There's a lot of folks that talk about those missions being weird kind of situations. And,
well, when we came back, you sit down with a shrink, because you have to do your, you do your out survey. And, this lady's like, well, do you care about the mental health of your soldiers? And I was like, well, absolutely. I was like, ma'am, I said, do you know what this mission was? And she's like, no. I said, tomorrow we turn in our weapons and our pro masks and we get on planes and we fly back to our parent unit. Like, I will never see these soldiers again. I mean, even the people that sent us and received us, like, they didn't understand what mission we were doing. And I was like, we're not a cohesive unit. I mean, when you talk about team building with, the forming and the norming and the storming and then later the performing, we never got out of the storming. I mean, I got 10 cats that didn't even want to go, right? So we do this training at Riley to check the block and get our Anthrax series, right? And then they sent us to Mosul, probably the most dangerous city in the world at the time. And then I align us with JSOC and we're banging targets for like 100 days straight. And then, we get remission to Basra. And so they're still storming then. I mean, there was never a norming or a performing element. And then in May, we came back home again. So, I mean, mentally, everyone was fine, but no one really liked each other. I mean, the only person I ever talked to afterwards was one of the captains and the master sergeant, who was kind of my team sergeant. He was kind of like my first sergeant. He was actually later went up to first IO command and was a first sergeant. But that was really the only guy that I even got along with. I mean, he was my assigned friend for a year. But yeah, when that mission was over, we all went back to our parent units and that was it. So I can't say that I didn't care, but to me, the mission and the folks that were part of the mission, that's what it was. It was a mission and I let it go. So when the mission was complete, compartmentalized, put it in the rear view, move on to the next slide.
What piece of gear did you love?
I don't know. I like my rifle. I mean, I'm a really good shot. I like my pistol. I mean, they sent me to all the right schools, so I'm really good with a pistol. I mean, most officers probably can't even say that, but I do teach some marksmanship. I'm good with a 9mm. I'm good with a Glock. I'm good with a 45. It's pretty much my go-to.
So what caliber are you going to carry with you on your go-to?
9mm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I love it. And then what rifle would you carry with you if you're going to go into a firefight?
Well, I like the M4. I mean, it's just standard, but obviously, even working in Afghanistan, we used AKs quite a bit because the enemy has them, and then there's 7.62 by 3.9 ammo everywhere. I mean, so you got the it all comes down to the ammo. What ammo do you have? So when we were in Iraq, I mean, I told the folks on my mint team, I'm like, hey, I said the currency, it's kind of like being in prison. I was like, the currency of the day is 9mm ammo. If someone wants to borrow our MRAP, someone wants to borrow a Humvee trailer, you get 2 boxes of 9mm rounds. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, dude, did you watch The Sopranos? Like, we can't charge them anything. I mean, I don't need anyone to shine my boots, right? But if you want to borrow my Humvee trailer for a day for a sergeant marshal, cough up 100 rounds of 9mm. Like, you don't have to ask why, because I'm going to teach my guys how to shoot pistol, because you just can't get 9mm rounds. So the only way to get 9mm rounds is when units rotated back to America. They either leave their stuff there in the amnesty box or they trade it out. So that was the currency, was 9mm ammo. And I taught all the guys on my team, even the guys I didn't like, how to shoot a pistol like, a true combat marksman should be able to shoot a pistol.
So that's something that's that's interesting to talk about. The world-class training that you had access to, that you were a part of, that you got trained. There's nobody better than the United States military and their trainers and the folks that we have teaching you how to shoot and how to move and how to communicate. What do you remember some specific training that you thought was particularly beneficial for you, like shooting or something?
Yeah, we run a course. It's a 10-week CQB course at Fort Bragg called SFARTIC, Special Forces Advanced Reconnaissance Target Analysis Exploitation Technique course. That's not classified, but it's a CQB course, and it's designed to train you to shoot, move, communicate, with a team, 3-man team, 5-man team, 200-man team, doesn't matter. And it was all flow drills. So a lot of fast roping, a lot of external breaching, some static breaching. We'd use quickie saws. We would use demo, just hooking, kind of like a SWAT team, hooking a chain to a door and just pulling the door off, flowing through. So that was a very technical school. Probably shot, 20 to 30,000 rounds of ammo, in 10 weeks. There was a few gates where you had to make, where you could be cut. But that was very beneficial. I mean, that was really where I got my base knowledge of, CQB, but, again, flowing with teams, kind of in a SWAT, type element. I mean, you watch SEAL Team, you watch all these, TV shows, whatever, but that taught us close quarters combat. Pistol, rifle, shotgun skills that I still remember to today. I mean, that skill set doesn't go away. You got to keep up with it. I mean, it's kind of like riding your bike or like swimming. I mean, you got to get out there and practice. But the skills that we were taught there, the instructors there, that certainly was world class.
Is there a hobby that you'd like to pick up that you never have, like a dirty secret hobby that you really wish you did this or did that? Maybe a.
No, I mean, not to sound arrogant, but I think I've lived the life of 3 men. So I don't need to jump out of airplanes anymore. I don't need to be, in a 3-gun competition, out in Vegas. I don't ride motorcycles. I mean, I rode hard, for 24 years in the military. And no, I don't have anything that I didn't do or I haven't seen. Foxy doesn't have a bucket list. There's no places that I need to go or haven't seen. Like, I haven't seen the pyramids in Egypt, but I've been to Egypt and it's a dump. So I don't care. Thought I wanted to see the Great Wall of China. Then they sent us COVID-19. Okay, I don't care. So don't want to go to China. The only place I haven't been that I think would be cool would be like Australia. And I haven't been to, Jerusalem, to Israel. Again, that would be kind of fascinating. But if I don't get there, I think I'll be all right.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, right. You talk about living the life of 3 men. I mean, golly, you've like an Army airborne soldier might be considered an adrenaline junkie, but an SF, guy doing the things you doing in the leadership missions and the scope of the work that you were involved in. Yeah, that's you might be able to lean your head back and say, okay, it'll be all right. I'll relax for a few minutes and
Yep.
and You
I
know.
used to run. I used to run a lot. I've run 5 marathons. I don't run marathons anymore. I don't even run anymore. I mean, there's too much damage to the knees and the torn meniscus and all the rest. So, you do stuff, you try it, and then you're like, all right, that was great. I never got to do an Ironman. I thought that would be kind of fascinating. I got the swimming part down. I could swim 2.2 miles. That would take about 45 minutes or so, but then bike 129 and then run 26 after that. I've done the 26, and that wasn't fun. That took about 5 hours anyway. And so you're going to do the 2 mile swim, ride a bike for 7 hours, and then run for five. I think I'm gonna be all right. I'm gonna take a pass.
Amen. You're gonna take a pass. I have enjoyed hanging out with you so much. It's been a lot of fun. It's been we did lunch together a few years ago at Bragg, didn't we?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, that was great, great times, great times. I love you. I love your family. It's wonderful to spend some time with you. Have enjoyed it so much. Is there a story maybe you haven't told yet that you might want to tell, or something that you could leave us with? And one of the traditions that I would love it if you would do is to maybe call your unit to attention one last time and give us a hand salute and sign out. That doesn't have to happen right now, but kind of at some point as we think about ending this. I've really enjoyed hanging out with you. I've enjoyed it so much.
Thanks. I don't really have any, last minute advice, but, I do, follow some, Tony Robbins. Obviously, when you read about leadership, you read about, performance and high performing individuals. I mean, I would delve into some of his stuff. And then even Dave Ramsey, again, he gives financial advice. I don't espouse all of it, but there are some good things about, the seven concepts that they use, savings and, paying down debt. Again, I mean, I'm a big fan of being financially responsible. But, in life, you try things. And when I talk to the folks that I mentor, I'm like, hey, I'm just giving you some ideas, but you have to go try it out. And if it doesn't work, try something different. If that doesn't work, try something different. And if I give you advice and, take some of it, take it for, take it for what it's worth. If you don't take my advice and it doesn't work out, well, you learn something from that, so being a mentor, the people that you mentor or the people that listen to the program, if you hear something that you like, all right, try it out or don't try it out. It's no skin off my nose. I mean, I've run a good race. I fought the good fight, so I tried a lot of things, the things that didn't work out. All right, you try something else. There's goodness in that. You'll find your way. You'll find, your goal. But you have to have some goals. You have to set those goals. And if something's not working out for you, try something different. And people used to say, like, practice makes perfect. No, it doesn't. Perfect practice makes perfect. If you're trying to shoot a jump shot from the free throw line and you're still in the paint, well, when you get fouled and you go to shoot that free throw, all you've ever practiced was in the paint. You didn't practice what you needed to practice. So, to me, practice doesn't make perfect. It's perfect practice makes perfect. And, I know there is no perfectness. There's no 100%. We're all humans. We all have failabilities and vulnerabilities. But try to get as close to perfect as you can, and that's the zone where you want to practice in. So whatever it is, whether it's parachuting, whether it's shooting, whether it's driving, whether it's doing your taxes. I mean, you're not going to be able to do it perfectly. You can do the best you can, and then when you can't do it perfectly, find that mentor, find that guide, find that financial advisor, that tax prep guy, girl, to help you get there. Because there are folks that are out there. You got to go find them sometimes. You got to ask those questions like you asked. Sometimes they're hard questions. Sometimes it's hard to get people to open up. But share your stories. share your pitfalls. There's goodness in that. Someone will take a nugget away. And I tell my kids and I tell people that I talk to that everyone you meet, you should be able to take a nugget from them, whether it's good or bad. I mean, you meet some leaders, you're like, oh, I don't want to be like that guy. I don't want to be like that girl. If I had to teach this, I wouldn't teach it that way. Well, you learn something from that, but everyone that you meet, you should be able to take a nugget of wisdom from. You're not using them. I mean, they'll probably give you those nuggets for free if you ask the right questions. And that's really all life is. It's what questions do we ask of ourselves, and then how do we answer them? To me, that's how it boils down. So the goodness of your life is going to come down to the good, hard questions that you asked, and then how did you follow through? So that's how I would end it.
Amen. Amen. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing. Can I get you to call your unit to attention and sign out? Is that something that
How just what a final salute.
All right, sounds good. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Desert Eagle 6 signing out.
Oh, I love it, sir. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure. Lieutenant Colonel Chris Fox, everybody. Heroes I know. I love you, sir. Thanks much. We're going to show the video on the way out.
Thanks, Will.
I've got sunshine on a cloudy day. When it's cold outside, I've got the month of May. Well, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, I'm talking about my girl, my girl. I've got so much honey, the bees envy me.
You know Shirley Bayless is going to be watching this.
All right, good.
Baby, than the birds in the trees. Well, I guess you say, what can make me feel this way? My girl, my girl, I'm talking about my girl, my girl. I don't need no money.
Hey, I love you, sir. Congratulations. Heroes I know. Thanks so much.
I love you too, Will. Take care.
Bye, everybody.